at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. We appreciate everybody joining us on this call in such short notice. We are joined by a number of partner organizations representing the entire disability community, and there is a Q&A function that we encourage you to use. There will be time reserved for questions at the close of our call to action. We will be sharing resources throughout the webinar in the chat. And we are recording this, and this will be shared with everybody who registered. So again, thank you for joining us, and I will now pass it over to NCLD's CEO, Jackie Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this critical conversation. At the National Center for Learning Disabilities, we were founded by parents and have spent decades advocating for the rights of students with disabilities, because every student deserves a quality education and a life with unrestricted access and unlimited opportunity. Just last year, we adopted a refreshed mission statement to reaffirm our commitment to this community. Today, our stance remains very clear. We're here to advocate for equitable policies that ensure every single student with a disability can thrive. So, what's happened to bring us to this moment in time? Many of you know that on January 29th, the president issued an executive order on educational freedom. This was directed at the Secretary of Education to develop ways to use formula funds, which include IDEA, our seminal special education law, to promote school choice, and to do it within 60 days. Following that, on February 13th, Linda McMahon had a confirmation hearing for the Secretary of Education. And during that hearing, not only was she unable to name the 50-year-old funding commitment by Congress to fully fund IDEA, she also evaded questions about whether private schools would have to accept students with disabilities and be accountable for their supports and their success. On March 11th, there was further a reduction in force with a complete decimation of the United States Department of Education. And in particular, the mass firings effectively shuttered the work at the Office of Civil Rights, which upholds and protects the rights of students with disabilities nationwide. The threat of dismantling the Department of Education is actually very clear and upon us. The president is expected to sign an executive order to dismantle the department under the guise of empowering families. Despite claims that IDEA will remain unchanged, we and our coalition of partners are here to explain why students with disabilities, their families, and educators are at a profound risk. This executive order is the culmination of months of what has been absolutely destabilizing policies meant to strip away federal oversight and accountability. You'll hear today about the vital importance of the department and how it plays a function for ensuring that policies are clear, they're actionable, and that schools and states are held accountable to meet the needs of students and the legal requirements for those in school systems, their families, and communities. So let's begin by describing first the value of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, our seminal law. IDEA was originally enacted in 1975. It was the Education for All Handicapped Children's Act. And at the time, Congress found that more than half of all the children with disabilities were not receiving appropriate educational services, and that over 1 million children with disabilities were excluded entirely from the public school system. IDEA serendipitously turns 50 this year. But before our law, students with disabilities were segregated, excluded, and denied services. They were effectively left behind. And this executive order not only threatens, but almost ensures that we turn back that clock. Today, 50 years later, 7.5 million children are served by IDEA, and an additional 1.5 million children are served under Section 504. Nearly 20% of the nation's undergraduate student population identifies as having a disability in our colleges and universities. Without the Department of Education's enforcement and guidance, there will be no mechanism to ensure schools follow that law, putting critical services and those protections at risk. We cannot allow this to happen. We are right now a united front working in concert across disability advocacy organizations throughout the United States. The community of disabled people is, however, not a monolith. All disabled students matter, and each has individualized needs. You will hear from leaders across the disability organizations who are working together in lockstep to protect those rights of all students from preschool through higher education. IDEA and Section 504 are civil rights laws, codified, and should be protected. I'd like to pass the baton now to my colleague and friend, Denise Marshall, who runs COPAA, so that she can speak to you more about how COPAA is responding to this and our points on school choice.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I really appreciate both your introduction, but more importantly, your convening of all of us today. As you said, we are organized, we are united, and we're a bipartisan force across this country, and we'll make our voice heard on all of these issues. And we invite each of you to join us in that. My name is Denise Marshall. I'm the CEO of COPAA, or the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. We are a national peer-to-peer network of attorneys, advocates, family members, students, and everyone who's working to protect the legal and civil rights of students with disabilities and their families. 50 years is a long time. I'm going to date myself. I graduated high school in 1978, so just shortly after the law and its regulations were promulgated. But I do remember when students began joining us in classes. But I've, had the benefit of the law for my children and now my grandchildren, and I know many of our members are also graduates having, benefited from the services and the supports of the IDEA. So, we hear a lot about this dismantling of ed and the need for improvement. We certainly would agree that there's always room for improvement. However, there's many ways to change a structure. And the only way that makes any sense or can be successful is to do so by careful planning. But that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing are a flurry of disjointed, unclear directives. This blowing smoke and creating chaos does nothing but harm our children, and it's unfair to them and to the families. We keep hearing about before there was a Department of Education. Well, that coincidentally was also almost 50 years ago. And we're, have no interest, as Jackie said, in moving back. We only want to go forward. We will not go back. So first, let me address the issue of vouchers and school funding and choice. As Jackie stated, many of our members across the country benefit from vouchers and choice at the state level using state funds. We understand that. And many of them understand that they had to give up their rights in order to access those funds. But we also know there are many families across this country who do not understand that they are giving up their federal rights to access funds, or that choice requires them to basically say the civil rights of my student don't matter. So we are not interested in any kind of change to the arrangement which either destroys public education or separates the 8 million, we could say 8 million students with disabilities, including the Part C folks, of students from their federal rights through federal vouchers or block grants. So I want to emphatically say no to those. If your state is intending on and continues a state level voucher, work to add more protections back in, but let's not take federal dollars and separate students from their rights. Second of all, I want to thank our partners at the National Center for Youth Law, who, along with COPAA as organizational plaintiffs and co-counsel, filed a federal lawsuit on March 14th on behalf of students with disabilities and their families from across the country that seeks to reverse the Department of Education's OCR, or Office for Civil Rights, recent decision to stop investigating civil rights complaints. This is in addition to what Jackie mentioned with the decimation of the workforce, but there was an announcement of a conscious decision to limit whose rights are being investigated, and that cannot be allowed. The administration cannot arbitrarily decide whose rights they will uphold. It is important to hold the department accountable to ensure that all students' rights are upheld and that they don't obstruct families' access to complaint investigation when that discrimination is based on the basis of race, sex, and the intersection of disability. It's intolerable that this administration continues to take these actions against a backdrop of what can only be described as unveiled hostility towards Black and Brown students, LGBTQ students, and those students whose race and gender intersect with disability. These vicious movements jeopardize student safety and may block access to educational programs in school where every student has the right to learn and thrive. And finally, I know other of my colleagues will address this in a little more detail in their comments, but I want to thank our bipartisan leaders in Congress who've worked with us over the past few decades to conscientiously align the education, disability, and civil rights statutes so that they are supporting the educational success of our children from birth to adulthood. Dismantling ed may mean that every child with disability stands to be harmed when federal funding is separated from key federal requirements, when federal oversight of discrimination in education is obliterated, and when investments in education, research, technical assistance, training, and data collection and transparency and outcomes for children are no longer exist. We will not stand by and let any of that happen, and we will not go back. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Denise, your advocacy, your members' advocacy, and your comments. The call to action is real. I'd like to continue with our friend and colleague, Chris Banks from the Autism Society.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all. Unfortunate that we have to do this, but we must. I think it's so important for us to remember that we're talking about human rights. We're talking about the basic human rights and the opportunity for all individuals in the disabled community to receive an education. That is the basis of the Individuals with Disabilities Act, as well as free access to public education. And I think what I could offer today is a little bit of what's happening at the local level as we see it. Autism Society of America is the oldest and largest national grassroots advocacy organization, founded in 1965. So this is our 60th anniversary. So 10 years after our founding, we see things happening that Marshall just talked about, Denise Marshall just talked about. We're grateful for that. I think there's great opportunities from our affiliate leaders. Across the United States, of our 70 affiliates in 33 states, we are going to state capitals because this issue of education has to be addressed both at the federal level and at the state level. And so we're going to need to keep working on this. When even under the Department of Education, IDEA has never fully been funded. And the federal government is only covering about 11% of the actual cost required to educate students with disabilities, which is very, very far from the 42% that Congress originally committed to. So it's almost, we need that additional support, and shifting the IDEA oversight and the oversight from the Department of Education to perhaps the Department of Health and Human Services raises for the Autism Society serious concerns about capacity, effectiveness. We already see the HHS as the largest federal department, but we know based on recent appointments, that they are going to be addressing issues that the Autism Society specifically will be paying attention to. So there's a great opportunity there at the federal level, but again, back to the state level. Many of our affiliates are spending time going to state capitals. Matter of fact, April 2nd, I'll be joining two of our affiliates in Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin, to go speak to the governor there. We have great champions, as Denise just mentioned, in Congress. However, they need our help. All of us have some form of an action center. The Autism Society has an action center, and we encourage everybody to reach out to their elected officials and let them know of how this projected move, which we're expecting the executive order this afternoon, will impact them and their lives. Every time I walk the halls of Congress, that's what I hear is, how is this impacting your constituents, the members of our organization, and the autism community? I think this is just part and parcel of the challenge in front of us. Denise mentioned the idea of the closure of the OCR offices in 14 different locations. Let me just identify. So Boston, we have an affiliate, the Autism Society of Massachusetts. Chicago, we have an office. Autism Society affiliate in Chicago, as well as in southeastern Illinois. Cleveland, Dallas, New York, Philadelphia, and San Francisco, all of them where we have an Autism Society affiliate that we are going to be engaging to see that the rights of students with disabilities and their families are protected and preserved. The burden is great on families as it is, and this will add to that burden unnecessarily. So it's a great concern for us. And of course, we have concerns over the 504 protections. And this ongoing lawsuit challenges the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and adds to the uncertainty surrounding the protection of students with disabilities. So there's a lot that's happening there, and I think that this is unfortunately one of the latest of many things that our organization is faced with this current administration. So I'm grateful that I have so many colleagues in this space who are so interested and so concerned and so passionate. And we look forward to working with all of you to protect the human rights for individuals with disabilities and their families. Thank you.
What a way to close, Chris. Really appreciate that, in particular around every student is a human and every human deserves the right to have high quality education.
Agreed.
I'd like to pass this to my friend and colleague, Chad Rummel from the Council for Exceptional Children.
Thank you, Jackie, and to all those who have spoken who are here with us. We are all called at this time on the same mission. We are together unified in supporting the 7.5 million plus students with disabilities who need us right now. IDEA has lived at the Department of Education for 50 years, and we fully believe that's where it belongs. CEC represents the millions of educators who are responsible for delivering a free, appropriate public education to these students. And we represent the higher education folks who are doing the research to ensure we're providing evidence-based practices as we deliver FAPE to these students. We represent the higher education teacher preparation folks who are doing all they can do to get more teachers in the classroom to address educator shortage. We represent the teachers, the paraeducators, the administrators, anyone who's trying to deliver that free, appropriate public education. And we've been so heavily affected already. Even though there's sweeping changes being proposed, we've been affected in the areas of personnel preparation, technical assistance to our educators, and research. I want to start by talking about personnel preparation for a moment. This is something that the Education Department supports. We know that our nation is facing one of the largest issues ever, which is educator shortage, and it hits special education especially hard. CEC has been ringing the bell on educator shortage for a long while. We saw in the last Trump administration efforts to build and support efforts to attract, prepare, and retain educators. CEC keeps pushing that forward, and we need the Department of Education to get with us in supporting how we attract, prepare, and retain educators. However, we've seen mass grants being canceled, including the Supporting Effective Educator Development Program, the Teacher Quality Partnership Program, and the Teacher School Leader Incentive Program. These are all working to prepare and develop educators and leaders. And these grants were canceled. Now, some of those grants, I believe over 100, were court ordered to come back, but we're still seeing how that's going to play out. We need the Department of Education right now working with us, not against us, as we figure out how to get more teachers in classrooms. That's what these students need. They need teachers who are working off evidence-based materials, who are high quality trained to deliver FAPE for them. Speaking of evidence-based practices, we've also seen big hits to research in the last several weeks. There were over $900 million in education research grants canceled through the IES, the Institute for Education Sciences, which has also been decimated at the staff level, nearly gone at this point. IES research is affecting all things around classrooms, academic interventions, behavior interventions, anything we can research to find a better way to do. That's what IES supports, and we need them doing that. We need those funds being there for those researchers who are doing great work to deliver that research to practice strategy for our educators. Again, in special education, we don't just try what works. We try what has been proven through research and evidence-based practices, and we need the IES continuing to support that. We need that funding and that support to be there. Our researchers are losing access to data sets and databases that they need to do their research. So while we're not seeing the effect of that in this moment, we're seeing that research being eliminated, and we know that's going to have driving effects down the road. Beyond the classroom, IES also researches big questions like the actual cost to educate a person with a disability. We just found out that the national study on special education spending, which was funded at $6.6 million through IES, could be eliminated as soon as tomorrow. So we're not going to find out what the actual cost is to educate a person with a disability. Even though that study is already two-thirds complete, I have to question what's the purpose in canceling it now. I think we all want to know what the actual cost is, and let's use that data to drive decision-making, to drive changes at the Department of Education. We need that data. We need to not be canceling that data. That needs to rise to the top and give Secretary McMahon what she needs to make these changes. And the last area I want to address that has been affected already, we've seen some cuts, is the in technical assistance. The significant reduction in staff at the Department of Education erodes our capacity to have this technical assistance. It erodes the capacity for the department to oversee, manage, and support these TA centers that are funded and driven by the Education Department. TA centers are a unique function of the department and its role to support implementing IDEA. Our practitioners need these TA centers to give them the resources to translate that research into evidence-based and best practices. Let me give you an example of this. The Center on Positive Behavior Intervention and Support, the PBIS Center, supports over 25,000 schools across 50 states to implement evidence-based behavior supports for students with and without disabilities. So losing support to manage and oversee these programs is a big hit to us. We need to have the department in full function, fully staffed, working to make sure these TA centers have what they need to deliver this support to the frontline practitioners that CEC represents. I just want to conclude by saying that I'm so happy that we are here as a community, gathered, united in this front. We all have a piece of this pie. We all have a responsibility to carry the torch forward and make sure that these students who we're all working for at the end of the day, we're all working to make sure they have what they need. It's great we're all coming together. I know that our members last month in a period of a few days sent over 30,000 letters to Congress. We care, we're passionate, and I'm just grateful that all of you who are here as speakers and on the call listening today are with us. We have a big uphill battle in front of us, and I'm glad we're all doing it together. So thank you, Jackie and crew, for coming together to support this cause today.
Chad, we couldn't be more grateful for your leadership and support. And as we mentioned earlier, we're in lockstep with one another and looking forward to continuing to work in concert. I really love to welcome Katie Neese to the conversation, who is running the ARC, to speak to us a little bit further, and then we're going to open it up for question and answer.
Thank you, and my apologies for not being able to join you until now. You know, the ARC has a long history in advocating for the rights of kids with disabilities to go to school. The ARC was one of the pioneers in the early 70s, suing the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It ultimately resulted in the federal special education law. And it was because parents had the audacity to want all of their kids, including their kids with disabilities, to live at home, to be part of a family, and to go to school. And for us, the role and the supports that have come from the U.S. Department of Education to states to help states meet their state obligation to kids with disabilities has been absolutely essential. We're very concerned about what these changes are going to mean in terms of, will there be enough support for new special education teachers and new therapists to work with kids in the classroom? Will there be sufficient guidance on what the law says when people get it wrong? And will there be sufficient protection so that kids can actually access the rights to which they're currently entitled? So I'm sure all of my colleagues have said all of those things before I jumped on the line. So why don't we open it up to questions, and I'm happy to respond.
Thank you, Katie. So appreciate your continued leadership, having led at the department previously. I'd like to open it up to Jen Coco from the Center for Learner Equity to speak to us, and then we'll move straight into questions.
Hi, thank you, Jackie. I am Jennifer Coco. I'm the Interim Executive Director at the Center for Learner Equity, and it's an honor to join my important colleagues in the advocacy movement today. At CLE, we are dedicated to ensuring that students with disabilities access robust educational opportunities, public school choices, support, and inclusive learning environments. We have broad and deep expertise regarding the benefits of students with disabilities, leveraging public school choice to access learning environments that enable them to thrive. And we champion public school choice as an important means by which students with disabilities have access to quality educational opportunities. The intentional gutting of the institution charged with protecting children with disabilities is a tragedy, full stop. The department oversees the distribution of critical funding to states, monitors whether states, districts, and schools, including public charter schools, are lawfully implementing programs that support and protect students with disabilities. And without this expertise, the dedicated personnel, and the infrastructure of the department, we lose critical safeguards that are needed to ensure children receive the educational programs and services essential to their success in school. The negative consequences of these recent cuts and executive action, which we're still trying to understand the full impact of, but even now it is clear that these repercussions will reverberate across generations of students. And so CLE, we urge national leaders to unite in opposition against such ill-conceived and damaging actions. For example, across multiple administrations, including the first Trump administration, the department has led important technical assistance efforts that brought together their experts on educating students with disabilities alongside their experts on promoting public school choice, including public charter schools. And these efforts have helped the charter school sector improve their capacity to educate the 420,000 students with disabilities that are attending charter schools today. The breadth and scope of cuts to staffing and research investments will undermine important progress made to ensure that all public schools, especially charter schools, are prepared to provide students with disabilities a quality education. And to those policymakers who feel that abolishing the department or moving the IDEA to a different department will not disrupt the administration of the IDEA, we reiterate that it's not just a matter of extracting special education from all the other education statutes that are overseen and implemented by the department. The education of students with disabilities is embedded into multiple education laws that Congress has intentionally and deliberately aligned in partnership with educators and disability advocates in order to efficiently use funding. This ensures that students with disabilities are students first. Extracting the IDEA risks the full array of funding and services for students with disabilities that come from all our education statutes, working in conjunction through the expert staff at the U.S. Department of Ed. And so we encourage everyone, students, families, educators, anyone involved in the day-to-day administration of public ed to speak up and tell your lawmakers about what's at risk and the ways you're already feeling the impact of this chaos, whether it's in your IEP meetings or in your coordinating services and budgets for next year. They need to understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. You've rounded us out with a beautiful call to action. And folks who are listening, we will continue to put resources in the chat box, as well as we will put calls to action out for the websites of the associated partners on this call. So each of you can take action to rally your legislators and your senators around these needs. What I'd like to do now is address audience questions. We know you're here not only to be informed, but also to be the recipient of responses and what you can do now. The first question I want to talk about is the IEP. There was a beautiful remark from one of the audience members. If the Department of Ed is essentially gutted and the efforts of the department have been shuttered by the mass firings, and that has made it a dysfunctional system, how can a parent enforce the provision of a child's IEP? And I think there are a lot of parents probably on this call and those with networks that are even broader. And so I'll start with this question and open it up to the rest of our colleagues and say, in truth, I'm not sure how that's even possible. So we have due process for a reason. The IEP is in place so that students have accommodation supports, modifications, etc., to make sure that they have access, opportunity, and can thrive with a high quality education. When that isn't happening, due process kicks in, and a family should be able to move through the system to ensure accountability. Well, part of that accountability is federal oversight through the Office of Civil Rights. If OCR, as we've mentioned, has been essentially gutted, how can we ensure accountability takes place? And I think the short answer to that is we cannot. There is no way to ensure that that happens. And I'd like to open it up to my colleagues for any additional comments.
You want us to raise our hands or just
No,
jump
go
in?
for it, Denise. Just jump in. Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think that, there's it severely cripples the ability of families to protect their rights, and that's part of what we're saying. If you've ever used a Dear Colleague letter from the Department of Ed or guidance to further your position at an IEP table, you've benefited from some of the work of the department. Or even when you do advocate for specific evidence-based practices, as Chad was saying, you've benefited. So first of all, I want to say that. But second of all, I do want to say that, of course, folks, there are other kinds of dispute resolutions that you can utilize. You can go to mediation. You can file a state complaint, which does happen at your state level. And I know some of our members are working with their clients and families to look at state laws and use those as well to advance what they're trying to do or the protections for students. Now, of course, that's one of the reasons why we need a Department of Ed, because not all state laws are created equal. We know that. We know that if you happen to live in a state that has strong laws, good for you, but there are many states out there that do not. And so that's just another way to look at it. I don't want people to give up hope. There are things you can do they are still required, whether the Department of Ed is there or not. The IDEA, Section 504 are in place, and they are required to implement the program and provide your child FAPE.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in on what Denise said, it's really important for people to know that IDEA and 504 exist with or without the Department of Education. And just because the department the proposal is to disband it, those laws are still on the books, and those rights still are important and available today. I think one of the things that's important to remember is the Department of Education helps support states to do the right thing, right? I'm a former Department of Education political appointee, and one of the things we did several years ago It was a result of having talked to a lot of administrators and teachers and principals. And before the pandemic, but certainly resulting from the pandemic, we had a ton of turnover in positions of leadership where we had people in important jobs that didn't have the background to really understand their roles and responsibilities under the federal special education law. So the department issued general supervision guidance, and that's not very sexy, but it was, here's everything you need to know, state, to make sure that you are meeting your responsibilities under the law and to ensure that schools and school districts are as well. That was something we did in partnership with state leaders. And it was an important thing so people didn't have to guess, because I often say, if you make me guess, I may guess wrong. And the department's there to try to provide that baseline of information so that states know what their obligations are. And just to remind folks, the reason we have IDEA is because every state's constitution says we educate the children that reside in this state. And what parents of kids with disabilities were able to demonstrate was, if you educate one child, you need to educate all children. And as a result of that, we have this really spectacular law that's implemented by humans, humans who often make mistakes. And that's why things like Dear Colleague letters and guidance from the department to help people so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can just go to one place to find out what the right answer is, what the law says, what the regulations require, and then they can do the right thing. So it's really important that people understand that their rights still exist. Accessing them is going to take longer, but we need a strong Department of Education to help states do the job that they've been tasked to do.
Chris, you're muted.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I absolutely agree with what Denise and Katie said about, even if the Department of Ed is dismantled, our children's rights are not dismantled, right? And we are held accountable. We are held accountable to make sure that they are protected. And I think that as I look at this, one of the threats to dismantling the department and scattering the offices to other agencies where they lack the experience and expertise to implement IDA and to protect students with disabilities, right? Now, my crystal ball broke and I've run out of duct tape, so I can't tell you how it's all going to work out. But I can tell you this: no matter what happens, whether the department stays as is or whether it gets dismantled, disseminated, the work at the grassroots level will continue. It must continue, because we have to make sure that we don't let anybody who is ignorant, and I'm using that word, I think, appropriately, to how these laws work and the needs of our children. If they don't understand it, we must educate them. We must help them to do the job they're now going to be charged to do that they had not been given the responsibility or the mandate to do previously. I think that's part of what Ruth Sullivan and Dr. Bernie Remlin, who founded the Autism Society 60 years ago and fought so hard for the IDA, were thinking about, as Katie just talked about, the idea that, we have to educate all students. And I think this is really what's so important for us to remember. Our jobs, the advocacy we must do on behalf of our children, is not going to go away, even if they dismantle the Department of Education. And in fact, our work is going to be harder because we're going to have to educate those who don't have any experience or knowledge of it. And yesterday they went to bed thinking one thing. Today they woke up having a whole new job description and with this added to it. So let's fight for our children in a different way. Let's be stronger for this. Let's do what Chad talked about, making sure that we have the teachers and the professionals to provide for them. I think that's part of the mandate. I do want to call that many of us have action alerts. Many of us do, right? And you're seeing some of them being posted here. Thank you, Lindsay, for doing that, because when we walk the halls of Congress and we listen and we talk to our elected officials, they're listening to what our parents are saying to them. They're counting how many of these things they get. We're tracking it, but they're counting it. I handed a pile of petitions to one of our elected officials recently, and he said, "How many of these are from my constituents?" And I said, "Congressman, every single one of these is one of your constituents." Well, that got his attention in a different way. And I think we have to continue to do things like that and not give up. Not give up, because if we give up, we're giving in. I'm not giving in. So I and the Autism Society are not giving up.
Hear, hear. I appreciate the remarks from my colleagues. It reminds us two other questions in the question and answer session. One is we can answer fairly quickly, and the other, I think, will require a little longer response from all of you. The first is that Congress it is required to do anything with regard to dismantling the department. It takes congressional moves, 60 votes for that to take place. And I think what we're communicating here, if I can take liberties with my colleagues, is that while that stopgap measure is in place, it does not necessarily indicate that this executive order doesn't get signed. It means that there are extra legal things happening at the administrative level, and much of that is with intention. And creating tumult and turmoil, unfortunately, has become a strategy. And so while it is extra legal to shut down the department without congressional votes, we can effectively see what's happened with the mass firings at the department. And so I want to be clear, it does take a congressional act to do that. And yet we're still facing an executive order from the president forthcoming. I would love for us to address the conversation in our last discussion, as well as in the chat, which is around the health and human services aspect of moving parts of IDEA and/or the department into a different cabinet position. And so, Denise, I'm hoping you can start us off with what would it look like? What's the impact on kids with disabilities and their families and teachers should the department move effectively IDEA and its oversight and/or implementation to HHS?
Yeah, so thank you, Jackie, and thank you for reminding us that an executive order cannot dismantle ed, or neither can comments during a hearing or interviews. So the fact is, we don't really know what is being planned. We've seen no details about what it might look like if it moves to HHS. We see no details about how they will ensure that the laws are followed, that their obligations are carried out. And as Chris said, I thought that was a great analogy with your crystal ball. I don't want to find out whether the duct tape works. I don't want to find out what falls through the cracks and whose kids get left down on the ground while they're, creating turmoil. So I think people mention HHS as if, okay, it was there once before. It can just go back there. Well, you listen to Chad, you've listened to everybody here, and I think they made great cases for the progress that we've made in 50 years. I'd also do not want to go back. And as Christopher said, we will not give up. And we do believe in the power of the courts and the law and the rights of people. And despite even some actions to try to skirt those obligations, along with every other obligation that this administration is trying to skirt. I say stand strong, contact Congress, make sure that they don't agree to the dismantling of ed, because we can't go back in time. We don't want to go to a medical model, and the kids we support are complicated. We know what it takes, whether you're talking about reading or behavior or math or any of those things. It's complicated, and we don't want to turn back the clock. So again, want to join in on the chorus for stand strong and let's protect what we've got and protect our kids.
Chad, Jen, I can see that you're interested in responding to this as well. Jump in whenever you'd like.
Sure. I just have a couple. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but I'll share a couple of them. We know that, yes, we started in HHS, but over 50 years, we've grown so much. What we're doing with this law has grown so much based on the research, based on the evidence-based practices. We've been able to expand. Let's remember that IDEA is an education law, first and foremost. Let's also remember that of our 7.75 million students with disabilities, 3/4 of them spend 80% of their day in the general education classroom. Students with disabilities are general education first. We need our professionals, the experts at the Department of Education, working across the entire department to ensure that students with disabilities are integrated everywhere. If we make this a health law, that's gone. And not to say that it couldn't exist over there, but the quality that our students would receive would definitely be deteriorated because, again, we have to collaborate across the entire ecosphere of education. I also think about issues like educator shortage. That is not just a special education issue. That's all of education. If we're tucked over here in Health and Human Services, and there's folks over here in what's left of the department working on educator shortage, we're not working together. Right. So I would ask the administration and Secretary McMahon to say, what is the problem you're trying to fix? And does that move to HHS actually fix that? No one can say, first off, what we're trying to fix, right? We know there are possibilities to improve the department, but if we align starting with the problem, not the solution, we'd find that HHS is not where we belong.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, potentially gross generalization. But when I think of moving special education to HHS, what comes to mind for me is that I think about in my local town or my local city, and there was an idea to say, you know what, I don't think we need a superintendent. Let's just move it to the administration of our local public health system. Let's have our local hospitals run our schools. And I would go, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that reinforces the point that students with disabilities are students first, they're children first. And it, in our view, one of the biggest barriers that is held back the success of the IDEA and ensuring that students with disabilities are learning and achieving their full potential, it's because special education has been so siloed from the rest of education. And the only way to undo that is encouraging and fostering collaboration and remembering that kids with disabilities are kids first. We presume that they should be educated in general education, and we want general education teachers to understand and embrace their ability to teach students and to do multi-tiered systems of supports and all these wonderful things that are so much bigger than special ed. And so my fear is that moving into HHS just further pathologizes our children when they're children first, and it loses out on the incredible, robust talents of so many folks that can understand how to put all these pieces together so that schools are educating all kids successfully, not, pathologizing 20% of them and thinking about them in the lane of a health or medical context. That's not what our children need.
I agree, and I'm going to jump in. Obviously, the Autism Society is very concerned about what we're seeing from the Secretary of the HHS, and that is a whole nother battle for all of us. And the idea that education falls into the medical environment again is a great concern. Let us not forget, as grassroots advocates, that the idea also is that education is a home rule issue in many states, right? So we have to encourage our families, our constituents, to talk to their local board of educations and say, no matter what Washington decides, we're not giving up on our kids in this town or in this school district. So, Jen, it's a little bit of what you talked about, right? But it's like, no matter what Washington is deciding, I'm not giving up. I'm not stopping for it. My kiddo deserves this IEP. And I'm going to bring the resources that I know the law says I can bring to that IEP conversation to make sure you, school board, you, superintendent, deliver what they need. I will say great concern is, how are we going to measure quality going forward if they dismantle it the way they're looking at it? How are we going to see what each state is doing and how we can help everybody to improve? So I think that there's that larger issue from the state, from the national level. But again, I'm going to come back to our founding. We're a grassroots organization, mothers and fathers fighting for their kiddos. And where do moms and dads do that today? We do it at the local school boards. We make sure we go there. Vast majority of us, our largest portion of our property tax goes to our school board, but yet we don't vote in it. So we have to really get involved there. I really think that's an important call out, that if never before you thought about the importance of voting in your school board, now really should make a difference for you.
And if I could just jump in real quickly, I think it's important to remember why we have a federal special education law in the first place. it was because state and local governments had specific policies, if not laws, that excluded kids with disabilities from the public schools. Where I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, if you had Down syndrome or an intellectual disability, you couldn't go to high school because it was thought there's no value in trying to provide you with that kind of education because you couldn't master it. And today we have lots and lots and lots and lots of kids that are graduating from high school with a standard diploma that 25, 30, 50 years ago, nobody ever thought could master grade level work. And so when you've got an executive order or a notion out there that we just need to return things to the states that educate, and that the reason we have this law is because that local control made our kids not able to go to school. And so if local school policies and state policies had done the right thing, we wouldn't need this, but they didn't. And it was because of parents and advocates across this country that said, my family member with a disability has just as much value as my family member who doesn't have a disability, and going to school and getting an education is something that should be afforded to everyone. So I think we need to be prepared for, because we're thinking about like what's next, right? We need to be prepared for the arguments and say, don't you really think that education is a local issue? Absolutely. Absolutely. The Department of Education does nothing on curriculum, nothing. What it does do is help support an infrastructure. It helps support you, make sure that your special ed teachers are trained to deliver high quality services. It means that there are protocols that come from research that tell you how kids can learn to read, how to make accommodations, how to modify a curriculum so a kid can learn. All of those things come from support at the federal level, so states and districts don't have to reinvent the wheel 7.5 million times over and over and over again. So we need to stay strong. We need to remind folks that their rights exist under the law, but accessing those rights are going to be more difficult without a robust and vibrant Department of Education.
I'm mindful of the time, and I want to say, one, thank you to the panelists for joining us, and of course, all of you all for participating. We have loads of questions that we still haven't gotten to, but I also want to be thoughtful about making sure you all think, what next? What are we going to do with the information we have at our disposal, and how do we spread this information to all the networks, the families, the communities that we have within our reach? Because I think what we've all been saying, in addition to why the department is so necessary and vital to the students that we serve, is that the American public does not realize the value proposition of the department. And what we've been communicating throughout this discussion is not only how vital it is, but in what ways it is vital. And I think at this point, so many of the questions that have been posed have been about how we can communicate to legislators the value proposition. And I think that starts truly at the grassroots level. We've talked a lot about local control, the local level advocacy. Those of you on the call who have local networks, that's where it starts. We must be reaching out to our friends and colleagues, whether it's at dinner, through our communities, through the practices of our students after school, or through the social networks that we belong to, and providing concrete examples of not only the benefits that students receive because the department exists, but also the casualties that we will face if the department is entirely dismantled. And by proliferating that information, you can reach out to congressmen and women by letting them know this is going to impact their constituents in a way that they don't see fit for. So I want to give everybody a chance for your call to action. We have your action alerts and your resources posted. Is there anything that you would like the audience to do right now? What can they do with the information that we've shared?
I can
Well,
go first. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I would
Go
just
ahead,
say,
Chad.
all of us have, action alerts on our websites, exceptionalchildren.org/take action. We're actually collecting video testimonials on our site as well through a portal there. We have lots of fact sheets. The thing I want to say to everybody is this. I do not believe in my heart of hearts that the average person that you go to church with, that you grocery shop with, that you are in your community wants to do anything to hurt kids with disabilities. In my heart of hearts, I have to believe that. But I don't think they understand the impacts of what we're talking about when we say dismantling the Department of Education. We have to tell those stories locally. We have to tell them loudly. Getting on social media and doom scrolling is not advocacy. We have to be able to tell people the true story in regards to how it affects a student, and we have to give them the tools. I just gave you the tool, CEC's Action Center. Instead of just posting things we're mad about and angry about on social media, we have to post those stories and those action alerts. I can post them to all of you, but they have to go viral. They have to go exponential to the average person who doesn't know that sitting back and not saying anything is hurting someone they may love. Because again, I truly think most of us want the same thing. They just don't understand what that means. So every one of us needs to spread that loud and far at the local level as much as we can.
Yeah. I certainly echo everything that Chad just said, but I will add to that to say, make your story personal. Tell why your child, your grandchild, what did you benefit from if it was you that was served under the IDEA or 504. So make it personal and help people understand. I still have to explain to my mother, so I know that other people, just even if they have some level of understanding of what it is we're all doing here, don't necessarily understand it on the level that they have to take action. And the last thing I'll say is, whether you're in higher ed, you're in college, you're in preschool, you're in K through 12, your child was just born. Your rights are still your rights. This executive action has not changed any of them. You do not need to give up your accommodations. You do not need to give up your specialized instruction. You do not need to give up your child's right to be educated. So spread that word.
Chris, I think you're muted. I just want to make sure that we can all hear you.
Sorry, thank you. I've been trying to pay attention to the rule to mute, and after 5 years, I should know it. I think that I want to agree with what we just heard. I want to tag on to something, Jackie, you said that I think is really important. What can we do? We can talk to the teachers. I see in some of our chat, we have teachers here. Teachers are impacted by this. They care about our students. They want to deliver quality education. Let's engage them, right? Let's bring them to board meetings. Let's go to our community, as Chad said. Yeah, those who we shop with, those that we pray with, those that we play ball with, whatever it is, right? Because an educated populace is a stronger populace. Let's not forget that. All of us are better when all of us receive a quality education. So I'm going to end with, don't give in, don't give up.
Yeah, I would just echo what others have said. I think it's really important to know that nothing when it comes to your child's rights or your child's services are changed. And if someone says, because of this executive order, I don't have to, or your child is no longer eligible for fill in the blank, that's simply not true. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of rumors and misinformation floating around. So from all of us to all of you, your child's rights under the law do not change with an executive order. And the services your child is getting now do not change because of this executive order. And so don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And also, this law has produced a lot of success, right? A lot of success. It's brought new resources into schools that have benefited all children by nuanced learning and modifications of curriculum to understand that all of us learn in a unique and individualized way. The support that this law has given schools to do the job they want to do is profound, and we just have to make sure that all of those things that states and schools need to do the job they want to do are available to them.
Yeah, last note, call your representative, call your senators and tell them that however the IDEA has benefited you, tell them that benefit and tell them that you're scared and that this is creating chaos and that you cannot, whether it's you or your child or a classroom of kids you educate, our kids can't afford the disruption, and it's already creating disruptions and chaos, and it needs to stop. And your lawmakers need to hear that you care about this and you would not support further disruption. And they need to know that in a very blunt and real way. Thank you.
I'm so grateful to each of you for sharing your time with us, to everybody's on the call for spending the hour. You could have spent it in many ways, but you spent it trying to understand and prepare yourselves to fight. And we cannot be more grateful. Here are a few last sound bites for you when you go and reach out to your representative or your senator, or you're talking to somebody across the aisle, whether it's at a hockey practice or a dinner table or in a rally. You know, the disability community is going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of IDEA this year. And it's not lost on us that the administration is choosing to strip away the hard rights and oversight of those rights for students at the same time. The rights were not obtained easily. You've heard from all of us how families have had to advocate for that, not only in the past, but even to today, to ensure those rights are protected. And we are not going to stand by and let them loosely be navigated. So we want you to raise your voice. We want you to protect not only your students and your educators, your principals and your superintendents, but also what is, as Chris said, a human right, that all students deserve the human right to high quality education with unlimited access and unrestricted opportunity. So thank you today, and I suspect that you'll be hearing from us perhaps with a call-in day for all of us to rally together in concert. Please take care, and we'll talk again soon.